Since the creation of this channel, times of long nights, quiet uploads, moments of doubt, and flashes of hope. And through it all, you've been there. You showed up, you stayed till the end. You keep this channel alive when I'm not even sure what keeps me going. This isn't a big channel. It's not perfect, and it's never been about going viral. It's been about connection, about something real shared between a channel and a community that somehow still sees the person behind the silence. To my people in the United States, thank you for being the heartbeat that started it all. Your steady support has carried me through every slow season. To Trinidad and Tobago, you might be small in number, but your spirit is powerful. You show up for every drop, and your loyalty, I feel every bit of it. To my Nigerian family, your fire, your words, your energy, you remind me what resilience looks like. To the United Kingdom, thank you for your quiet strength and the way you keep showing up with grace and honesty. And to my Canadian viewers, your calm encouragement, your kindness, your trust, they never go unnoticed. And many all other countries I can't remember. I don't take this for granted. None of it. Every watch, every comment, every share. It's a heartbeat in this story we're building together. You turn this faceless dream into something that matters. So here's my promise. No matter how far this channel goes, I'll never forget the foundation, you. You're not just keeping the channel alive, you're keeping the creator behind it alive too. With everything in me. Thank you. The Glided Heart Stories creator. Now, let us begin our story. Rain whispered against the hospital window, tracing ghostly lines down the glass. Machines hummed softly beside the bed where Connor lay still, pale beneath harsh fluorescent light. Olivia sat beside him, her fingers trembling as she brushed the hair from his forehead. 8 years of love, now reduced to a stranger's silence. When his eyelids fluttered open, hope flickered in her chest. "Connor," she whispered. His eyes, calm and empty, met hers. "Who are you?" Her heart cracked, quiet and clean. For days, she fed him memories, their vacations, their promises, their laughter. He smiled politely, like a man studying someone else's life. What she didn't see were the messages on his hidden phone, the smirk when she left the room. Connor hadn't lost his memory. He'd lost his conscience. And Olivia, the woman who loved him most, was about to disappear from his world forever. The first morning after Connor's accident, Olivia cooked breakfast for two, out of habit more than hunger. The eggs went cold on the stove, the toast charred at the edges. The apartment smelled of burnt bread and antiseptic from the hospital disinfectant still clinging to her hands. She had spent the night watching him sleep, whispering his name like a prayer to a God who no longer listened. Connor returned home a week later, moving through the house like a guest. Every familiar thing seemed to unsettle him. The framed photos, the faint scent of her lavender shampoo, the wedding invitation stacked neatly on the table. "I don't remember any of this," he said, eyes scanning the walls. Olivia smiled through exhaustion. "That's okay. We'll start over." He nodded, but his gaze had already drifted toward the window, where the city lights bled into night. That first evening, he stood in the doorway of their bedroom, watching her arrange his clothes. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know," she replied softly. "But I want to." He said nothing. Later, as she fell asleep, he unlocked his phone beneath the blanket. A hidden chat blinked alive. "Lucy, still pretending?" "Connor, of course. She's buying every word." "Lucy, poor girl. Does she still cry when she sees you?" "Connor, every night." He smiled, a twisted private grin, and turned off the screen. Before the accident, Connor had been charming, magnetic, the kind of man who filled a room just by walking into it. Everyone loved him, Olivia most of all. He'd built a marketing firm from scratch, thrived on attention, and loved being admired. But behind that charm was restlessness, a craving for excitement that Olivia never quite satisfied. Lucy entered his life 6 months before the crash. She was new at the firm, younger, unapologetically bold, and uninterested in boundaries. What began as harmless flirtation turned into hotel rooms, lies, and whispered promises. Then came the crash, a late-night call, flashing lights, glass everywhere. Lucy had been with him that night, hidden from the police report by money and lies. When Connor woke in the hospital, bruised but alive, the fear of losing Olivia's trust became an opportunity. Amnesia. A clean slate. He'd seen it in movies. How sympathy erases suspicion. And Olivia, ever forgiving, gave him everything he needed to rebuild the perfect facade. Every morning, she tried to remind him of love. She'd cook his favorite omelet, play the songs they once danced to in their kitchen, bring out old photos. He would nod politely, never looking too long. Sometimes she'd reach for his hand, and he'd let her, but his fingers stayed still, cold, detached. One evening, she found him on the balcony, smoking. He hadn't smoked in years. "Did you used to do that?" she asked. "I don't remember," he said flatly, exhaling into the night. "Maybe it's a habit I'm rediscovering." That was the first time she felt something shift, a small, invisible crack forming in the world she thought she knew. She blamed herself for it. She told her friend Clara over coffee, "Maybe I'm pushing too hard. Maybe he just needs time." Clara squeezed her hand gently. "Or maybe you need to stop carrying everything alone." Olivia smiled, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion. "If I give up, then what was all this for?" Connor's phone buzzed constantly. He said it was work. Olivia believed him until one evening when his shower ran longer than usual. She reached for his phone, just to check the time, she told herself, and the screen lit up with a preview message. "Lucy, can't wait to see you tonight. I'll bring the same perfume. You said it drove you crazy." Her breath caught. She stared at the message, the letters burning into her memory. When he came out, she pretended to be asleep. The next morning, she made his coffee as always. "Do you remember anything new today?" she asked. He shook his head, feigning confusion. Still blank. She smiled gently. "Then let's make new memories." He kissed her forehead out of habit, a meaningless gesture, empty of warmth. The days turned into weeks. Connor's lies multiplied. Lucy became careless, leaving lipstick on his collar, calling late at night. Olivia noticed everything. She began photographing small, quiet details around the house. An untouched cup of coffee, a crumpled napkin, the indentation on his side of the bed. Each image was like evidence in a case no one else was willing to prosecute. At night, she'd sit in her darkroom, watching the photos develop under red light. His ghostly silhouette stared back at her through the chemical fog. "You're lying to me," she whispered to the image. But the photograph said nothing. A month after the accident, Olivia's father passed away. A quiet heart attack, unexpected. Connor came to the funeral, his hand on her shoulder, offering comfort that felt rehearsed. Lucy texted him through the service. He slipped away mid-reception, claiming a work call. That night, Olivia returned home alone, her makeup smudged with tears and rain. The house smelled faintly of perfume, not hers. She didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, She opened her laptop and searched for the process of legal name change. Her father's death had freed her from something, the need to stay. By dawn, she had submitted every form. When Connor woke up, she was gone. On the kitchen counter, a note read only, "Breakfast is on the stove. Don't forget your pills." He smirked, thinking she was still clinging. He didn't realize that this was the first morning she stopped being his. In the following weeks, Olivia detached piece by piece. She deleted their shared playlists, sold her engagement ring quietly, and packed her old camera gear. To Connor, she appeared calm, still loyal, still soft. But beneath that calmness, something fierce was growing. Each night she returned from her photography classes with a clearer gaze. "You seem different," Connor remarked once. "Maybe I am," she said. He didn't notice that her eyes, once filled with love, now looked at him the way one looks at a dying flame, beautiful but almost out. Meanwhile, Lucy began pushing harder. She wanted him to commit, to make things official. Connor promised her the world but hesitated to leave Olivia completely. Part of him enjoyed being adored by both women. Lucy, furious, cornered him in his car one night. "You said you'd leave her," she hissed. "What are you waiting for?" He smirked. "Timing. Let her think I'm still broken. When she's too tired to care, I'll end it cleanly." Lucy leaned closer, her voice dripping venom. "You're playing with fire, Connor." He smiled, thinking he was untouchable. But Olivia, quiet, watchful Olivia, was already planning the moment he would burn. Olivia stopped waiting for apologies. By the second month, her grief had calcified into clarity. Each morning, she brewed Connor's coffee, smiled as he left, and then began her own secret rituals. She documented everything: the calls he took behind closed doors, the perfume lingering on his jacket, the sudden business trips that aligned perfectly with Lucy's posts tagged at luxury hotels. She didn't need confrontation. She needed proof. Every click of her camera shutter became a heartbeat, every photograph a quiet act of rebellion. Through the lens, she studied the world not as a lover but as an observer, detached, calculating, almost cold. Her favorite shot was one she took by accident. Connor standing in the hallway, his face half lit, half in shadow. Looking at it later, she thought, this is who he really is. At work, Connor's colleagues began to notice small cracks. He forgot deadlines, grew irritable, and spent too long texting under the table. Lucy complained about being kept a secret. One afternoon, she appeared unannounced at his office. She was wearing the same perfume that Olivia had once loved. "Don't worry," she whispered as he froze behind his desk. "I told them I'm your cousin." "Are you insane?" he hissed, glancing at his assistant outside. Lucy smiled. "Maybe. But at least I'm not boring." Connor didn't realize Olivia had called earlier to surprise him with lunch, an act of kindness she no longer felt, but performed out of habit. When she stepped through the glass doors and saw Lucy leaning over his desk, her hands on his shoulders, she didn't flinch. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, Lucy's bold and triumphant, Olivia's calm and knowing. Then Olivia turned and walked away without a word. That night, she didn't mention it. She simply poured him a glass of wine, sat across from him, and smiled as he lied. "Just a client," he said. "Came in to discuss a campaign." Olivia nodded. Of course. Her calm unnerved him. She started volunteering at a photography workshop downtown, teaching children how to use disposable cameras. The kids laughed, unburdened by deceit. One of them, a little girl with a missing front tooth, asked, "Miss Liv, Why do you always look sad when you smile? The question pierced her like glass. That night, she looked at her reflection and hardly recognized herself. The woman who once believed in forever now looked like someone rehearsing her exit. She picked up her camera and drove to the pier, the same place she and Connor had gone the night he proposed. The water was black and restless, reflecting city lights like broken mirrors. She took a single photo, the waves swallowing the pier's edge, and whispered to the wind, "This is the last time." When she returned home, Connor was asleep, his phone glowing faintly beside him. She picked it up and scrolled through his messages. Lucy's name was everywhere: heart emojis, hotel addresses, confessions written in careless arrogance. And then, one message that froze her breath. "Connor, give me another month. Then I'll go back to Olivia. I need her inheritance first." Her body went cold. It wasn't love he wanted. It was money. The next morning, Olivia woke up before dawn. She made him breakfast, kissed his cheek, and watched him leave. Her movements were graceful, almost serene. When the door closed, she locked it behind him and let herself finally break. But only for an hour. Then she stood, wiped her tears, and began her plan. She met with her lawyer, transferred her accounts, and sent a resignation letter to her photography agency. She told no one the truth, not even Clara. "It's time I start over," was all she said. By the end of the week, she'd signed the final paperwork for her name change. Soon, Olivia Morgan would become Evelyn Hart. A new name for a new beginning. Connor grew careless. The comfort of her silence made him reckless. He began meeting Lucy in public, holding her hand in dark restaurants, convinced no one would notice. But the city was small, and gossip moved fast. One night, Clara called Olivia in tears. "Liv, I think you need to see something." She sent a photo, Connor and Lucy in a bar, laughing over champagne, his arm draped around her waist. Olivia stared at the image for a long time, then simply replied, "Thank you." She didn't cry. She didn't rage. Instead, she printed the photo, folded it neatly, and placed it in an envelope labeled "Final Exhibit." Then she booked a flight. Destination: Lisbon. Departure: 1 month from today. Her lawyer would send the notice of property transfer the day she left. By the time Connor realized she was gone, even her bank accounts would vanish from his grasp. One evening, Connor found her on the balcony, sipping wine under a dim orange sky. She looked peaceful, radiant even. "Something feels different about you lately," he said, joining her. She smiled faintly. "Maybe I stopped expecting miracles." He chuckled, not understanding. "That's my girl, realistic as ever." Olivia turned to him, studying his face one last time. She wanted to memorize this version of him. Smug, unrepentant, utterly unaware. "You should get some rest," she said quietly. "You've got a long week ahead." As he walked away, she whispered to the empty night, "So do I." The next morning, she visited her father's grave, camera in hand. The cemetery was quiet, dew glistening on the grass. She placed a white lily on the stone and took a single photo, the flower's reflection against his engraved name. "Dad," she murmured, "you told me once that love isn't what we say, it's what we do. I finally understand." Back in the car, she looked at the sky through her viewfinder, the horizon soft, limitless. For the first time in months, her chest didn't feel heavy. That evening, Connor came home early, drunk on confidence. He had just signed a lucrative contract and bragged about how Lucy helped seal the deal. Olivia congratulated him with quiet grace. "You've always been good at pretending," she said with a small smile. He grinned, not catching the weight in her tone. "Maybe it's my best skill." She nodded, setting her camera on the table. "Yes, it is." Inside the camera was a memory card holding every photo she had taken. His deceit, her pain, and the quiet proof of everything he'd destroyed. It wasn't for revenge. It was for closure. When she finally walked out that door, she wanted to leave behind truth, not bitterness. Later that night, as he slept, Olivia whispered, "You once asked if I'd still love you if you forgot me. Now I know the answer." She tucked the engagement ring into his palm and left without looking back. The next morning, the house was silent. The bed was empty, the closets half cleared. On the table, beside a single photograph of their last trip together, she had written, "When you remember everything, I hope it hurts." The morning Olivia vanished, Connor didn't notice right away. He woke up late, stretched, and called her name down the hallway. When there was no answer, he assumed she was out buying groceries or visiting Clara. He even hummed while shaving, the sound of a man who still believed the world revolved around him. But when he reached the kitchen, his hum faded. The air felt wrong, still, too quiet. No breakfast on the stove. No coffee brewing. Her shoes were gone from the rack. The framed photos on the shelf were missing. And on the counter lay a single envelope with his name written in her elegant script. Connor. He tore it open, expecting a love note, an apology. Inside was a folded copy of his message to Lucy, the one where he wrote about her inheritance. For the first time in months, Connor's chest constricted. He called her phone. Disconnected. He called Clara. "Have you seen Olivia?" A pause. "She didn't tell you?" "Tell me what?" "That she's leaving for Lisbon today." The world tilted. Connor raced to the airport. He called every name he knew at immigration, using influence and money to locate her. But by the time he reached the terminal, the flight to Lisbon had already departed. He stared through the glass as the plane lifted into a pale morning sky, a white streak disappearing into endless blue. Lucy called him mid-breakdown. "What's going on?" He didn't answer. "She found out, didn't she?" Lucy pressed. "Connor, calm down. We'll fix this. She'll come back." He hung up. For the first time, he realized Olivia was gone for good, and there was no plan to manipulate her return. That night, he drank himself into silence, staring at the engagement ring she'd left behind. "Damn you," he whispered, voice cracking. "You don't get to leave me." But she already had. 3 weeks passed. Connor spiraled. The office gossiped about his moods, his absences, the rumors of a fiancé who'd moved abroad without notice. Lucy, meanwhile, became impatient. She wanted him to marry her, to make everything official. "You said she's gone," she said one night, perched on his lap. "So what are we waiting for?" Connor rubbed his temples. "This isn't a good time." "It's never a good time," she snapped. "Do you even love me?" He looked at her, the same way he once looked at Olivia when lying came easy, and said, "Of course I do." But even he didn't believe it. Lucy caught the flicker in his eyes. She stood abruptly, her voice rising. "You think you can just use me, don't you?" "Lucy, calm down." "No, you listen," she shouted. "I gave you everything. My reputation, my body, my time, all for you to treat me like a placeholder." Connor slammed his glass on the counter. "You were never supposed to be more than a distraction." The words escaped before he could stop them. The silence that followed was venomous. Lucy's face hardened. "You'll regret that." 2 days later, the news broke. Lucy was pregnant. Connor stared at the test result she shoved in his face, his heartbeat a dull roar in his ears. "That's impossible," he muttered. "Believe it," she said coldly. "And if you try to deny it, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you are." She wasn't bluffing. She posted cryptic photos online, an ultrasound, a hand wearing his watch, captions about new beginnings. Within hours, the gossip industry devoured it. Connor's PR team begged for a response. His investors demanded stability. His mother called in tears, begging him to make it right. Within a week, Lucy moved into his penthouse. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Olivia walked the narrow cobblestone streets of Lisbon, camera in hand. She stayed in a small apartment overlooking the river, sunlight spilling across her bed each morning like forgiveness. She didn't check the news, didn't read the messages piling up in her old inbox. Her world had become quiet again, filled only with the click of her shutter and the whisper of the wind over the water. Some nights she still dreamed of Connor, not with longing, but with strange detachment, as if watching a film she'd once loved but outgrown. On her dresser sat the last photo she took before leaving, the crashing waves under a stormy sky. Beneath it, she'd written one line in her journal: "I forgive him by forgetting him." Back in the city, Connor's nightmare deepened. Lucy was relentless. She redecorated the apartment, demanded attention, and flaunted her pregnancy to anyone who would listen. "I'm carrying the air," she told the tabloids with a smirk. Connor's mother adored her at first, until she caught Lucy screaming at staff, throwing plates, and boasting about her future mansion. Rumors reached investors. Deals began to collapse. Connor's empire started to rot. At night, he'd find himself staring at old photos of Olivia, her gentle smile, her quiet eyes. He tried calling her again. Still disconnected. He hired private investigators. Nothing. It was as if she'd vanished from existence. One evening, after too much whiskey, he confessed to his mother. "I faked my amnesia. She found out. She left." His mother slapped him. "Then you deserve everything you're living now." Lucy's control tightened. "We're announcing the engagement next week," she said one morning over breakfast. Connor blinked. "I never agreed to that." "You don't need to," she replied, smirking. "Your mother already called the press." He clenched his fists. "You're insane." "I'm pregnant," she said sweetly. "You'll do whatever I want." For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes, not of exposure, but of being trapped. The day of the engagement announcement arrived. Cameras flashed as Connor and Lucy stepped onto the hotel stage. The room buzzed with polite applause. Lucy beamed for the photographers, her hand resting dramatically on her belly. But then, something strange happened. As Connor turned to speak, a hotel employee handed him a sealed envelope. "This was delivered for you, sir." He opened it and froze. Inside were printed photos, Lucy and him in bed, his texts bragging about his fake amnesia, his lies about Olivia. Every sin laid bare. A final note in familiar handwriting: "You once said memory is a gift. Consider this your reminder." His hands trembled. He looked at Lucy, smiling obliviously for the cameras. Then he walked off stage without a word, leaving reporters shouting questions and flashes bursting behind him. Lucy chased him into the corridor. "Connor, what's wrong?" He turned, eyes blazing. She knew everything. Who? Olivia. Lucy's face went pale. He laughed bitterly. You think you won? You were just another lie in a man full of them. She slapped him. Cameras caught it. By nightfall, the footage went viral. That evening, Connor sat alone in the darkened penthouse, surrounded by chaos. Flashing notifications, missed calls, headlines screaming his downfall. He picked up his phone one last time and typed, "To Olivia, if you ever read this, I remember everything." He hit send, knowing it would go nowhere. Then he poured another drink and whispered to the empty room, "You were right. I only lost what I never deserved." Outside, rain began to fall, the same soft rhythm as the day she first thought he'd forgotten her. But this time it was real. The night after the engagement disaster, the city slept under a haze of rain and neon. Connor's penthouse looked like a ruin of glass and gilt. Champagne stains on marble, reporters outside like vultures circling decay. He sat by the window, half-dressed, staring at the skyline. A single photo lay on the table. Olivia at the beach, sunlight bending around her hair like forgiveness. The news had already named him the man who lied for love. Clients dropped him. Sponsors fled. Lucy had vanished, taking jewelry, money, and what was left of his pride. He didn't chase her. He didn't chase anything anymore. Somewhere between his third and fourth glass, his mother called. He didn't answer. Instead, he scrolled through old videos. Olivia laughing, Olivia dancing in the kitchen, Olivia whispering, "You're home." Each clip felt like another nail sealing the coffin of who he used to be. When dawn arrived, he whispered, "I remember, Liv. Every detail, every lie." And for once, the silence answered back. Across the sea, Lisbon bloomed into morning. Olivia stood on her balcony, camera in hand, watching fishermen cast nets over rippling gold water. It had been nearly a year since she left, yet sometimes the past still shadowed her in dreams. She had changed her name legally, Evelyn Hart now, a quiet woman with a new apartment, new passport, and an exhibition opening in 3 weeks titled Unremembered. Her photos told her story without words. Foggy windows, empty chairs, waves swallowing footprints. Critics called them melancholy yet liberating. She smiled at that. Freedom wasn't always joy. Sometimes it was simply peace. But that morning, as she sorted through her mail, she froze. An envelope, no return address, her new name written in familiar pen strokes. Her heartbeat quickened. She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a plane ticket. Destination: their hometown. Date: 1 week from today. A single note attached. "If you can forgive me once, see me once more." No signature. But she didn't need one. Olivia spent the week pretending it didn't matter. She told herself she'd thrown his memory into the sea, let it dissolve like salt. Yet the thought lingered. What if she went, not for him, but for closure? On the 6th night, she walked along the Tagus River, the same moonlight that once glimmered on their anniversary trip now gliding across her reflection. The air was cold. She whispered, "You don't need to go back to pain to prove you've healed." But part of her still wondered, had he changed, or had he simply lost everything? When she boarded the flight, she told herself it was only to confirm what she already knew. The city felt smaller when she returned. Streets she'd once known were sharper, emptier. She went straight from the airport to the hospital, the same one where the lie began. Connor was there. She found him in a private ward, pale and thin, IVs tracing veins like maps of remorse. The doctor outside whispered, "Liver failure." The drinking. He looked up as she entered. For a moment, time broke apart. The man who'd once played God with her heart now looked human, fragile, frightened, and finally aware. "Olivia," he rasped, voice dry. "It's Evelyn now," she said quietly. He tried to smile. "You changed everything, except your eyes." Silence stretched between them. Machines beeped faintly, marking the seconds slipping away. "I got your letter," she said. "The ticket." He nodded weakly. "I didn't think you'd come." "I almost didn't." Connor exhaled, a trembling sound. "I thought losing you would make me free. Instead, it made me nothing. I can't sleep without seeing your face. I can't breathe without hearing your name." "Regret doesn't erase what you did," she said softly. "I know." He gestured weakly toward the nightstand. "That's why I wrote this." A small leather-bound journal lay there. She hesitated before picking it up. Inside were dated entries, confessions written across months of deterioration. "I lied because I was afraid of losing control. I faked amnesia to test her love. She deserved better than me." At the final page, "If she ever forgives me, maybe I can forgive myself enough to die in peace." Olivia closed the book. Her hands trembled, not with anger but something gentler. Pity, perhaps, or closure. "I don't hate you anymore," she whispered. Connor's eyes glistened. "That's enough." He reached for her hand, but she didn't take it. Instead, she placed the journal back on the table. "Goodbye, Connor." When she turned to leave, he whispered, "Thank you for remembering me." She paused, just for a heartbeat, then walked out into the light. Outside, the world was drenched in gold. Olivia inhaled, the air tasting like rain and forgiveness. She looked at her reflection in the hospital's glass doors. The same face, but not the same woman. A message buzzed on her phone. "Clara. Clara. Heard you're back. Are you okay?" "Olivia. Yes. Finally." She turned off her phone, hailed a taxi, and watched the city blur by. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, not mourning, but release. That night, in her hotel room, she sat by the window with her camera. Outside, rain streaked the glass just like that first day. She took one photo. This time, she wasn't capturing pain. She was preserving peace. The shutter clicked softly. 2 weeks later, a news headline crossed the world. "Businessman Connor Hayes dies peacefully after long illness." Olivia read it once. Then she closed her laptop and whispered, "Rest now." She opened the balcony doors. The wind carried her hair across her face, warm and wild. Somewhere deep inside, she felt the final thread of their story untangle. She smiled, not out of triumph, but freedom. Lisbon was drenched in sunlight the morning the news reached Olivia. The air smelled faintly of salt and lavender, a mix of life and decay. She had just returned from a photo shoot in Sintra when Clara called. "Liv," Clara said softly, still calling her that, though the world now knew her as Evelyn Hart. "It's about Connor." Olivia closed her eyes. She already knew. "He's gone," Clara continued. "They say it was peaceful. Liver failure. He was in hospice for weeks." A long silence. Only the sound of waves breaking outside the window filled the space between them. "Are you okay?" Clara finally asked. "I don't know," Olivia said. "But I'm not broken." After the call ended, she sat for a long time in the quiet. No tears, no shaking. just the slow heartbeat of a woman who had survived something immense. That evening, Olivia walked down to the docks where she'd taken her first photo in Portugal. A small fishing boat tied loosely to a post, rocking in rhythm with the tide. She stood there for a long time, the sun dissolving into the sea, painting everything gold. Her memories of Connor came back not as pain but as echoes, fragments of laughter, whispers of warmth, the way he used to tuck her hair behind her ear. They felt distant now, almost belonging to someone else's life. She realized something profound. She wasn't mourning him. She was mourning the version of herself who had once loved him. The girl who believed love could save someone. The woman who stayed when she should have walked away. That Olivia was gone, buried with his memory. Days passed. Letters came, condolences from mutual friends, journalists requesting statements, even a message from Connor's mother asking if she might attend the funeral. Olivia declined all of it. She didn't owe the past any more goodbyes. Instead, she poured her emotions into her work. Her upcoming exhibition, Unremembered, became a tribute to what she'd learned about love, loss, and freedom. She added one final piece, the photo she took that last night in the hotel room after visiting Connor. Rain streaking down the glass, city lights bleeding through. She titled it, Closure. When the curator asked about its meaning, she simply said, "It's the sound of a woman finally exhaling." On the day of the exhibition, the gallery buzzed with life. Soft jazz, murmuring crowds, flashes from cameras. Olivia stood quietly in a corner, watching strangers study her pain turned into art. A young woman approached, tears in her eyes. "Your work," she said, voice trembling. "It feels like healing. Like remembering something you thought you'd forgotten but needed to." Olivia smiled gently. "That's what it's for." The woman hesitated. "Is it true what they say? That your photos are based on a lost love?" Olivia met her gaze. "Once, yes. But the story isn't about loss. It's about what happens after." The woman nodded, wiping her tears. "Then I think you saved me." When she walked away, Olivia exhaled deeply, the kind of breath that carried years of weight, and finally let it go. Later that night, after the gallery emptied and the city fell quiet, Olivia stayed behind. She walked to the centerpiece of the exhibition, a projection of a single photo looping softly on the wall, a sunrise over a calm ocean. The same ocean where she had once thrown away her engagement ring. She touched the cool glass of the frame, whispering, "You see, Connor, I didn't need revenge. I needed peace." In the reflection, she didn't see a victim anymore. She saw a survivor. Absolutely. Here's a full rewrite of Act 3, Part 2, Revelation, expanded to approximately 1,050 words, keeping the same cinematic, third-person limited perspective on Olivia. It deepens her internal shift from hurt to hard-won understanding, and ties her art to the revelation that forgiveness is self-liberation. Olivia's mornings began to arrive like quiet proof, the small rituals that stitched a life back together. She learned the language of light again, how a sliver of sunrise could turn a cracked window into a confession, how dust motes could look like a constellation if you knew how to see. Her hands, once trembling with grief, steadied behind the camera. She taught herself to breathe between frames instead of holding her breath. Her project, The Rooms We Leave Behind, sent her into houses that had been emptied quickly, a cradle in an attic, a single shoe by a door, a teacup with lipstick stains frozen on the rim. Every shot felt like a question she posed to the world and to herself. What remains when people walk away? Her answers were never melodramatic, no staged weeping, no obvious symbolism, but small, human residue, a curtain caught mid-flutter, sunlight pooling on a table, a child's drawing pinned behind a faded calendar. On a rain-slick afternoon in a house that smelled of old paper and moss, she found a music box tucked beneath a loose floorboard. The lid opened with a reluctant sigh. A brittle tune began, thin and oddly tender. For the first time in months, she let herself sit on the floor and listen. The melody looped until her chest unclenched. She thought of Connor then, not as the architect of her pain, but as a man with a fragile hunger that had never been satisfied. The thought didn't twist her anymore. It softened into something like clarity. That night she wrote in a small notebook she kept tucked in her camera bag. Not confessions, not plans. Phrases that felt true. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is removing the person from the center of your story so you can finally write the rest. The sentence looked simple when inked on the page. In practice, it was a revolution. A journalist from a well-known arts magazine asked to do a profile. Olivia declined 3 times. She said no because she did not want her words to be a spectacle, and because public curiosity could extinguish what she had built in private. But Daniel, who had become a quiet presence at her side, gently encouraged her. "Your story has teeth," he told her. "It can bite back at the things that hurt people. Let it." The interview happened in a studio warmed by late afternoon light. The journalist asked about her process, about the way she framed absence. He leaned forward then, fingers steepled, and asked the question that everyone wanted answered but feared to ask aloud. "Do you forgive him?" Olivia paused. Forgiveness had been a word she'd used in passing, a script she mouthed to make other people comfortable. Now, under the soft glare of the lamp, she gave an answer that surprised even herself. "I don't forgive him for his sake," she said quietly. "I forgive him for mine." There was a version of me that would have stayed and ruined herself waiting for a word that would never come. Forgiveness is the line I drew for myself. It is the first border of my life rebuilt. The journalist scribbled, but he also looked like a man who had witnessed something shift. The resulting piece framed her not as a tragic figure, but as someone dangerous in the best possible way. Courageous enough to refuse victimhood, patient enough to transmute pain into craft. Not all revelations came from interviews. Some arrived like weather. One Saturday, while teaching a small class of children to use disposable cameras, a boy wandered up to her with a photograph clutched in his fist. He'd taken a picture of a cracked park bench and somehow, with the innocent honesty of children, he told her, "My daddy left and this bench is the same. But look, the sunlight makes the crack pretty." Olivia knelt until she was eye level with him. The child's mouth was earnest and unrehearsed. "You know why that's pretty?" she asked. "Because it shows something healed. It shows the crack is part of the bench now, not the reason the bench is ruined." The boy grinned like he'd been let into a secret. "So it's not sad?" "It's different," she said, and the word fit like a key. That exchange stayed with her. It crystallized something she'd been feeling but couldn't name. That pain changes the landscape of you, but it does not have to be the map you carry forever. You can redraw borders. You can choose which landmarks remain. In the months that followed, her work grew more courageous. She photographed a laundromat at dawn, the machine's metal gleaming like small moons. She captured a widow making tea in a kitchen full of empty chairs. She made a sequence of photographs of her own hands, hands that once trembled when they reached for a ring, hands that now steadied a tripod and tied knots for a tent on an overnight shoot. The public response to these images surprised her. Emails arrived from strangers who had left marriages, from mothers who'd found safety after years of quiet suffering, from men who'd learned only through loss how to be better partners. People told her the photos had given them language to name what they felt. They said the images didn't just sit still on a wall. They made small, active shifts in the way people opened their lives to possibility. One evening, an older woman approached her at a small gallery showing in Porto. Her hair was mostly white, pulled back into a careful bun. Her fingers were knotted with age. She took Olivia's hand and, with the frank tenderness of someone who had weathered storms, said, "Thank you for showing these rooms. My husband left me in '86. I thought I'd be empty forever. Your pictures told me that emptiness can be a place to plant seeds." Olivia's throat tightened. She would have hugged the woman if it felt natural, but she instead clasped her hands and nodded. The woman's eyes shone, grateful and direct. "You don't have to be who broke you," she added softly, as if giving a benediction. That moment was a fulcrum. Olivia felt the full weight of how her work had become a conduit, not for catharsis alone, but for collective reclamation. She had started out taking pictures to keep evidence of betrayal. She was ending up making art that taught people to find new roots. Forgiveness came, not as an epiphany with trumpets, but as a series of small decisions. To stop checking old messages, to stop cataloging betrayals like trophies, to say no to interviews that would exploit pain for clicks. She met with her lawyer to finalize a series of donations. Modest, anonymous gifts to shelters and community arts programs that helped women rebuild. "This is what I want to give back," she told Daniel. "Not money for closure. Space for others to begin." Her camera became the instrument of that promise. She no longer took photos to prove anything to Connor or to the world. She took them to prove she could survive and then thrive. Each new frame was a layer of language for the life she wanted to live. In time, the phrase that had begun as a sentence in her journal settled into the way she moved through the world. She would sometimes whisper it when she packed her bag before a shoot. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is removing the person from the center of your story so you can finally write the rest. And so she wrote, slowly, beautifully, not with the aim of erasing the past, but with the intention of translating it into something that could carry light. The revelation, finally, was not about Connor but about herself. She had become someone who could hold the memory of betrayal and still look at the horizon and see room for dawn. It was a modest power, not miraculous, but true. It was the discovery that the act of leaving had not been a failure but a reclamation, and the act of staying away had been the bravest translation of love into survival. She learned to remember differently. The past did not vanish. It rearranged itself into a foundation. From that base, she began to build a life not tethered to his misdeeds but anchored in her own truths. The photographs, the interviews, the small emails of thanks, they were not trophies of suffering. They were proof that she had chosen to become someone the pain could no longer recognize. That was the revelation that finally felt like home. The seasons turned without ceremony. A year after Connor's death, Lisbon pulsed with sunlight and quiet life. Olivia had grown used to mornings filled with the hum of espresso machines, the flutter of curtains, the clicking of her camera lens. Her once haunted eyes now carried the calm of someone who had finally learned to live without ghosts. Her exhibition, Unremembered, had become an international phenomenon. Critics called her a visionary of emotional landscapes. The woman who once drowned in heartbreak now stood beneath skylights and applause. She had turned pain into poetry, betrayal into brushstrokes of light. Yet, beneath the acclaim, Olivia remained simple in her routines. She still took long walks by the river, fed stray cats outside her studio, and sent quiet postcards to Clara every Sunday. Her walls bore no framed photos of Connor, only oceans, bridges, and silhouettes of people walking away toward brightness. But life, as she'd learned, never truly stands still. One evening, her gallery in Paris hosted a private preview for a group of photographers. The air buzzed with the low hum of conversation and the clinking of wine glasses. Olivia stood near the projection of her most recent work, The Rooms We Leave Behind, a sequence of abandoned interiors captured in amber light. A man approached her, drawn not to the art, but to her silence. He looked to be in his mid-30s, with eyes that carried an artist's exhaustion, the kind that knows both loss and beauty. A vintage Leica hung around his neck. "Your work feels human," he said, his accent soft, uncertain. "It doesn't just show emptiness, it shows what was loved before the emptiness." Olivia smiled faintly. "That's what I try to capture, the traces of what mattered." He nodded. "I'm Daniel. I shoot for Nomad Collective." "Evelyn," she replied, though he might have known her as Olivia Hayes from the rumors that once shadowed her art. But Daniel didn't mention any of that. He looked at her as if she were only the woman standing before him, not the story whispered behind her back. They spoke for nearly an hour, about photography, travel, and how silence could tell stories words never could. He told her he'd once lost someone too, not to death, but to a choice. "When people leave," he said, "we think we've been abandoned. But sometimes they're just making room for who we're supposed to become." His words lingered with her long after the event ended. Over the next few weeks, Daniel became a gentle presence. They'd meet at cafes or exhibitions, sometimes talking for hours, sometimes saying nothing at all. There was no urgency, no expectation, just the quiet rhythm of two people who understood loss. One afternoon, while photographing a derelict villa outside of Montmartre, Daniel asked, "Do you ever miss the person you used to love?" Olivia adjusted her lens, capturing the sunlight pooling across a broken piano. "I don't miss him," she said softly. "I miss who I was before he broke me." Daniel nodded. "And who are you now?" She took another photo. Someone who finally learned that love without truth is just a performance. Their friendship deepened slowly. Daniel never asked about her past, but he could feel its weight in her pauses, in the way her gaze sometimes drifted toward things no one else saw. One evening, they sat along the Seine, sharing a bottle of red wine, the city alive with laughter and golden lights. Daniel spoke about his travels, the people he'd photographed in war zones and forgotten towns. "Pain," he said, "has the same color everywhere." Olivia looked at the river, her reflection mingling with the city's glow. "Maybe," she said, "but healing has different shades. For me, it started the moment I stopped waiting for someone to say sorry." He watched her quietly. "You're stronger than you think." She smiled. "No. I just got tired of bleeding for someone else's wounds." The clock tower struck midnight. The air smelled of rain. For the first time in years, Olivia felt something unexpected. Peace, tinged with the fragile possibility of love. Months later, Daniel invited her to collaborate on a project, a photo series about rebirth. They traveled through Italy, Morocco, and Iceland, capturing contrasts of ruin and renewal. Burnt fields sprouting green again, collapsed cathedrals flooded with new light. Some nights, when exhaustion gave way to laughter, Olivia caught herself looking at Daniel differently. Not as a replacement, but as a reflection of who she had become. One night in Venice, they stood on a bridge overlooking water shimmering like glass. Daniel reached for her hand. Slow, hesitant. "You don't have to say anything," he murmured. "Just don't run." Olivia didn't. She let their fingers intertwine. No declarations. No promises. Just warmth, gentle and honest. And for the first time, she didn't think of Connor. The past had finally let her go. When Olivia returned to Lisbon that autumn, the city felt different. Lighter, almost breathing in sync with her. She rented a new studio by the river, its windows tall and bright. The walls were empty for now, waiting for her next exhibition. On her desk lay a folder titled Remembrance. It was her most personal project yet, one that blended her old pain with her newfound peace. The centerpiece was a self-portrait she'd taken in Venice, her reflection in water, blurred but calm. Beneath it, she wrote a single line: "To forgive is to set yourself free." Critics would later call Remembrance her masterpiece of maturity. But for Olivia, it wasn't art. It was closure. The opening night drew hundreds. Cameras flashed, glasses clinked, and yet she felt detached, not above it all, but beyond it. As people wandered through the gallery, whispers filled the air. She turned heartbreak into light. She's the woman who disappeared and came back different. She made peace look beautiful. Olivia smiled politely, but her mind drifted to quieter things. The gentle hum of Lisbon streets, the laughter of children outside her window, Daniel waiting somewhere in the crowd, camera in hand, pride in his eyes. When she found him, he lifted his lens toward her. "Smile," he said. She did, a real smile, soft and unguarded. The click echoed like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. Later that night, when the crowd had thinned, Olivia walked to the final piece of her exhibition, a projected video loop of rain running down a hospital window. The same rain from the day her story began. The plaque beneath it read, "He faked amnesia to cheat, not knowing she knew. She left. He regretted his foolish lies. And she learned, love never needs pretending." Visitors stood still before it. Some whispered prayers. Some cried. Others simply stared, lost in their own reflections. As Olivia watched them, she realized her story no longer belonged to her alone. It belonged to every person who had ever been betrayed and still found a way to begin again. After the show, she and Daniel walked along the riverside. The air was cool, the moon slicing silver paths across the water. He took her hand. "You did it," he said. She looked up at him. "No," she replied. "I finally stopped trying to undo what already happened. That's the real freedom." He kissed her forehead. "Then this is your new beginning." They stood in silence, watching the reflection of the city ripple and reform, like memory itself, bending but never breaking. Weeks later, Olivia returned to the small coastal town where she'd once thrown her engagement ring into the sea. She walked along the same rocky shore, waves whispering against her ankles. The sky was gray, the kind of melancholy that once would have made her ache. Now it just felt honest. She took one final photo, her footprints leading away from the water, vanishing into the mist. She titled it Peace. It would be her last public work. Years later, a short documentary about her life closed with these words narrated over her final exhibition montage. "He faked amnesia to cheat, not knowing his fiancé knew. She left him, and he died remembering. But she lived, and remembered differently. Because love built on lies dies twice, first in truth, then in memory. And sometimes, peace isn't forgetting what broke you. It's becoming someone the pain no longer recognizes." In her last interview, Olivia was asked, "What would you say to the woman you used to be?" She smiled gently. "Thank you for staying long enough to learn when to leave." True power lies not in revenge, but in rebirth. Love without honesty is self-destruction. Healing begins not when we forget the pain, but when we remember ourselves again.